It's the 13th century, and the most important job in the Western world is up for grabs. The Pope has died. But the guys in charge of picking the next one, these super powerful cardinals, they just can't agree. And I mean, they really can't agree. For almost 3 years, the top seat is empty, and things are getting chaotic. So, how do you get a bunch of stubborn, powerful men to make a decision? Well, the story of what happened next is wild. It involves a locked room, starvation, a leaky roof, and it accidentally created a system that's still used today. This isn't just some dusty old church history. It's a human drama that shows how sometimes crazy situations lead to game-changing ideas. All right, let's set the scene. We're in 1268. Pope Clement IV has just passed away. Now, back then, picking a new pope wasn't the organized smoke signal and balcony affair we see today. It was often a free-for-all, with Roman noble families and even emperors trying to get their guy on the throne. But the church was trying to stand on its own 2 feet, to be more independent. And boy, did that desire lead to one heck of a crisis. The Cardinals, 17 of them, gather in a city called Viterbo, not Rome, because Rome itself was a bit of a mess with power struggles. These cardinals were a mixed bunch, Italians, Frenchmen, even one from Spain. They were smart, they were political, and, yeah, some of them definitely had their eyes on the prize themselves. Their job: elect a new pope. Sounds simple, right? Wrong. Days slid into weeks, weeks into months. Then, believe it or not, months turned into years. And still, no pope. So, what was the holdup? Well, imagine Europe back then as a massive chessboard with kings and emperors all trying to make their moves. The cardinals were basically split into 2 teams. You had the French cardinals who wanted a pope who'd keep things friendly with France, especially supporting Charles of Anjou, who was the French king's brother and had just taken over southern Italy with the previous pope's blessing. Then you had the Italian cardinals, who were getting pretty nervous about all this French influence. They wanted a pope who'd look out for Italian interests and keep the church from becoming a puppet for any king. Neither side had enough votes to get their candidate elected, but they both had enough to block the other guy. It was a total stalemate. Plus, you know how it is. Personal grudges, old rivalries, all that human stuff got mixed in with the big political issues. The people of Viterbo, who were initially pretty proud to host this important meeting, started to get really antsy. Think about it. All these cardinals and their staff living in your city for years. It was expensive, and it was messing with local business. The whole situation was spinning out of control. Not having a pope wasn't just a problem for the church. It was creating a massive power vacuum that was making everyone nervous across Europe. After nearly 2 years of this, the folks in Viterbo had had enough. Their local leaders, Raniero Gatti and Alberto di Montebuono, decided to take some pretty extreme measures. In the summer of 1270, they did something unheard of. They locked the cardinals inside the papal palace, literally. They bolted the doors and said, You're not coming out until you pick a pope. That's where the word conclave comes from. Cum clave, meaning with a key. It wasn't some ancient church tradition at that point. It was an act of sheer desperation by fed-up citizens. Now, being locked in was bad enough, but the Cardinals still couldn't agree. So, the people of Viterbo cranked up the pressure. First, they started cutting back on their food. No more fancy banquets. Now it was basic rations. Still no pope. These cardinals were proud men, used to respect and luxury, and here they were, basically prisoners. Then, things got even crazier. Raniero Gatti, probably egged on by Charles of Anjou, who really wanted a pope who'd back him, ordered his men to remove the roof of the great hall where the cardinals were staying. Can you imagine? Suddenly, these elderly, important men were exposed to the baking summer sun, then the cold autumn rain. It was miserable. One cardinal actually died during this ordeal, and another got so sick he had to leave. This wasn't just about making them uncomfortable, it was a public shaming. The message was brutal. You guys are supposed to be leading us, and you can't even agree on a leader for yourselves? Look at you now, with no roof over your heads. The psychological pressure must have been unbelievable. Think of these brilliant scholars and diplomats huddled together, hungry, cold, and utterly humiliated. Something had to give. The church was suffering. Their own health was failing, and the whole of Christendom was watching this disaster unfold. They finally realized they needed to find a way out of this mess, a compromise. So, they picked a small committee of 6 cardinals, 3 from each side, and gave them the power to choose someone. Even that was tough, but with the horrible conditions and the endless pressure, they finally broke the deadlock. They decided to look for someone completely outside their bickering circle. And who did they pick? A guy named Teobaldo Visconti. He wasn't even in Viterbo. He wasn't even a cardinal. He was an Italian, which was good for one side, but he was off on the 9th Crusade in the Holy Land with Prince Edward of England. This meant he was far away from all the political backstabbing in Viterbo, which appealed to everyone who was sick of the infighting. He was known as a good, smart, and diplomatic guy. He was the ultimate compromise. So, on September 1st, 1271, after nearly 3 long years, they elected Teobaldo Visconti as Pope. A messenger was sent galloping off to the Holy Land to tell him the news. Apparently, when Visconti found out, he was pretty shocked and supposedly said something like, "God forgive you, what have you done?" He might have been a reluctant pope, but at least the church had a leader again. Visconti rushed back to Italy, got ordained as a priest, because he wasn't one yet, then consecrated as a bishop, and finally, in March 1272, he was crowned Pope Gregory VII in Rome. Now, Gregory VII hadn't forgotten the nightmare of his own election. He knew firsthand how dangerous it was for the church to be without a leader for so long, and he was determined that it would never, ever happen again. So, one of the first big things he did was at a major church meeting called the Second Council of Lyons in 1274. He issued a famous decree called Ubi Periculum, which basically means, where there is danger. And this decree took the desperate measures used in Viterbo and turned them into official church law for electing popes. The rules were super strict, all designed to make sure the cardinals made a quick decision. Things like, 1. Cardinals have to meet within 10 days of a pope's death. 2. They have to be completely locked in, cum Clave. No contact with the outside world. 3. If they don't pick a pope after 3 days, their food gets cut down to just 1 dish per meal. 4. And if they still don't have a pope after another 5 days, it's just bread, water, and a tiny bit of wine. Think about it. The awful experience of Viterbo, the hunger and the exposure, was now the official rule book. The idea was tough, but simple. Make them uncomfortable enough, isolate them enough, and they'll be forced to agree. This was revolutionary because it aimed to stop all the outside meddling from kings and nobles that had caused so many problems before. The impact of Ubi Periculum was huge. It didn't mean every papal election afterwards was super smooth or quick, but it set up the basic system that, with a few tweaks here and there, is still used today. That whole idea of locking cardinals away, trying to cut them off from political pressure, and pushing them to a decision through austerity. That all came from this one chaotic election. It really helped the papacy become more independent and made the process of choosing a pope an internal church affair. So, that crazy 3-year saga in Viterbo, the first conclave, wasn't just some historical footnote. It was a turning point. It was born out of total gridlock, public anger, and real suffering. But it led to a system that has lasted for over 750 years. It showed that even ancient institutions can change, sometimes because they're forced to by ordinary people who've just had enough. What can we get from this wild story today? Well, it's a pretty good reminder of how power and ambition can mess things up, even in the most sacred places. It also shows that sometimes it's the everyday people, like the citizens of Viterbo, who end up pushing history forward when the powerful can't get their act together. And it tells us that for any institution to last, it has to be able to change, sometimes in really big ways, when it hits a crisis. The whole Viterbo episode wasn't just about picking one pope. It was about the church figuring out its future, a future where its leaders would be chosen from within, locked away from the world, forced to really think and pray about their decision. It was a messy human process that led to something that has profoundly shaped religious history and, in turn, world history. That locked room in Viterbo wasn't just a prison. It was a pressure cooker that forged a new way forward. Pretty incredible, right? It makes you think, can extreme situations sometimes force positive changes that wouldn't happen otherwise? And how do you think the lessons from something like the conclave play out in how leaders are chosen in other areas of life today? I'd love to hear what you think down in the comments. If this story got you curious and you want to really dive into the nitty-gritty of the first conclave and how papal elections have changed over time, I've put some links to some amazing books and resources in the description and in the first pinned comment. Seriously, there's so much more to uncover. And hey, if you enjoyed journeying back in time with me for this story, do me a favor. Hit that like button, share it with anyone you know who loves a good historical tale, and definitely subscribe for more stories about the incredible events that made us who we are today. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you won't miss our next adventure into the past. Until then, keep asking questions and keep exploring.